I stood in the bathroom, holding a pregnancy test, my fingers trembling as if afraid to touch the plastic casing. 2 lines. I stared at them, unable to believe that after 2 years of failures, injections, and tears, it had finally happened. My breath quickened, my heart pounded with joy, but something deep inside tightened my chest. I wanted to run to Ethan, my husband, to shout the news, but I froze, hearing his voice from the next room. "Kate, she won't find out," he whispered into the phone, his voice low, almost unfamiliar. "I'm careful. I promise." I stood still. Kate? Who was Kate? My feet felt glued to the cold tiles, and the joy from the 2 lines dissolved as if it had never existed. The test slipped from my hands and hit the floor with a dull thud. Ethan was cheating. My husband, who held my hand at every doctor's appointment, who promised we'd get through this together, was talking to someone else, hiding behind my back. And I had just found out I was pregnant. I pressed my hand to my mouth to keep from screaming. My head buzzed, thoughts tangled, but one was clear: I had to know the truth. Now. I opened the bathroom door, trying not to betray myself with trembling hands. Ethan was sitting on the couch, phone to his ear, but when he saw me, he quickly hung up. "Who was that?" I asked, striving to keep my voice calm. "Nobody, just work," he replied, flashing the same smile that once made me melt. But now it felt fake, like a cheap mask. His eyes avoided mine, his fingers nervously gripping the phone. I'd known him for 5 years, and I knew when he was lying. "Ethan," I said, stepping closer, "if you're lying to me, I'll find out." He laughed, but it was a tense laugh, like a taut string. "Lizzie, what, are you paranoid?" "Everything's fine." Fine? Nothing was fine. The 2 lines on the test, his whisper to some Kate, his lie, everything spun in my head like shards of broken glass. I went back to the bathroom, picked up the test, and hid it in a drawer. I wouldn't tell him. Not now. First, I'd figure out what was going on. That night, I lay in bed next to him but couldn't sleep. His steady breathing irritated me, as if he had no worries, no secrets. I stared at the ceiling, replaying every moment he might have lied. All his late nights at work, all the times he hid his phone, all the evenings he came home smelling of someone else's perfume. How could I have been so blind? But now I saw. And I wouldn't let him fool me again. The 2 lines changed everything, not just because I was pregnant, but because I was no longer weak. I wasn't the Lizzie who cried over single-line tests. I was a woman who would uncover the truth, even if it tore my heart apart. I turned my head to Ethan. He slept, unaware that I'd heard his conversation. Unaware that I no longer trusted him. Unaware that I was pregnant. Tomorrow, I'd start looking for answers. Tomorrow, I'd find out who Kate was and what he was hiding from me. But tonight, I just lay there, hand on my stomach, promising my baby, we'll make it. With or without him. Ethan had started to change. At first, I thought it was because of our struggles with pregnancy. 2 years of failures had drained us both. But in recent months, he'd become a stranger. He came home late, saying, "Project, Lizzie," and avoided my gaze. His answers were short, as if he feared saying too much. I noticed how he hid his phone, how he quickly closed his laptop when I entered the room. It wasn't like him, not the Ethan who once shared every detail of his day with me. I had trusted him. For 2 years, I believed every word, every promise that we'd become a family. We went through hormone injections together, tears after yet another negative test, tense talks with doctors. I thought we were a team. But now I saw cracks. That whisper on the phone, "She won't find out, Kate," haunted me. Who was she? Why was he hiding? And why now, when I was finally pregnant, was he pulling away? Every time he smiled at me, I searched his eyes for lies. Every time he touched me, I felt cold. My trust was melting, replaced by panic. What if he wasn't just cheating? What if he was planning to leave? What if I was left alone with the child we'd waited so long for? I couldn't just sit and wait for him to confess. I couldn't let fear paralyze me. So I decided to act. If Ethan was lying, I'd uncover the truth. I'd track him, not like an obsessive, but like someone protecting her future and her child's future. I'd check his phone, his email, his schedule. I'd pay attention to every detail I'd ignored before. And if he was cheating, I'd be ready. Not for tears, not for hysterics, but to protect myself. The next morning, I started small. Ethan went to work, and I stayed home, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. I opened our shared calendar, the one where he supposedly marked his meetings. There were a few late meetings, but no details. I knew his passwords, he never changed them, thinking I wouldn't check. I logged into his email. Nothing suspicious, just work correspondence. But something told me he wasn't foolish enough to leave traces in plain sight. Then I grabbed his spare phone, an old device he kept in a drawer, just in case. It was dead, but I found a charger and powered it on. No messages, no calls. But in the browser history, there was a tab for a hotel booking. A hotel outside the city, a room for one night, 2 weeks ago. Ethan had said he was at a conference in another state. My stomach churned. It wasn't proof, but it was a start. I jotted down the hotel's address in a notebook. Then I checked his main phone when he left it on the table while showering. The screen was locked with a new password. That hit me. He'd never changed passwords before. I tried his birthday, my birthday, our wedding date, nothing. My fingers shook, but I forced myself to breathe. Fine, Ethan. You want to play? I'll play better. That evening, I cooked dinner as if nothing had happened. We sat at the table, and I watched him. How he cut his steak, how he avoided my eyes, how he quickly changed the subject when I asked about work. Every move seemed suspicious. I smiled, but in my head, I was forming a plan. Tomorrow, I'd go to that hotel. I'd ask if they'd seen Ethan. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe I was wrong. But if not... I gripped my fork so hard my knuckles whitened. If not, I wouldn't stop until I knew everything. I wanted to confront Ethan directly, to ask who Kate was and why he was whispering on the phone, but something in his behavior stopped me. His eyes, when I mentioned work or his plans, turned cold, almost foreign. He answered briefly, then steered the conversation to something mundane: weather, TV shows, bathroom repairs. This wasn't the Ethan who once shared every thought with me. So I decided to dig deeper, paying attention to details I'd overlooked before. That morning, I drove to the hotel whose address I'd found in the browser history. The drive was long, and I turned on the radio to drown out the thoughts buzzing in my head like a swarm of bees. What would I say at the front desk? Hi, my husband might be cheating. Have you seen him here with someone else? I felt foolish but wasn't about to stop. In the car, I kept a notebook with details, the booking date, the hotel's name, even the time Ethan was supposedly at the conference. I didn't know what I was looking for, but I knew I had to find something. The hotel was small but elegant, with gleaming marble floors and flowers in the lobby. A young woman with a perfect smile stood at the front desk. I took a deep breath and approached. "Good morning," I said, trying to sound confident. "My husband booked a room here 2 weeks ago. I need to confirm some details for our accountant." She asked for a name. I gave Ethan's. Her fingers tapped the keyboard, and a second later, she nodded. "Yes, Mr. Ethan Wilson. A room for one night, March 12th. My heart raced. It was true. He was here. I forced a smile. "Great. Can you tell me if he was alone?" She hesitated. "I'm sorry, we don't disclose that information." I pressed, spinning a story about a lost credit card, but she just shook her head. I thanked her and left, feeling anger mixed with disappointment. I knew he'd been at the hotel, but it wasn't enough. I needed proof. When I got home, Ethan was already there, sitting in the kitchen, scrolling through his phone. I noticed how he quickly turned off the screen when I walked in. "Where were you?" he asked casually. "Shopping," I lied, watching his reaction. He nodded, but his fingers tapped nervously on the table. I decided to take a risk. "By the way, you didn't mention you were at a hotel a couple of weeks ago. I found a receipt in your jacket." His face changed, just for a moment, but I saw it. "Hotel?" "Oh, yeah, that was for work. A client was in town, I set up a meeting." "At a hotel outside the city?" I clarified, keeping my voice steady. He shrugged. "Yeah, it's more convenient." But his eyes darted, and I knew he was lying. That evening, I couldn't stop thinking about the hotel. About how he wasn't there alone. I imagined him laughing with someone else, touching her, saying to her what he once said to me. Those thoughts suffocated me, but I forced myself to breathe. I wouldn't fall apart. Not now. The next day, I went through his things again. In his briefcase, I found a receipt from a cafe, a place we'd never been to together. The date matched that conference. I photographed the receipt and added it to my list of evidence. Then I noticed he'd left his laptop on. I opened his email but found nothing. Then I checked the deleted folder. There was one message, sent to an unknown address. "Tonight?" As usual. My heart clenched. I copied the address and closed the laptop. This wasn't the end, I thought. It was just the beginning. I wouldn't stop until I knew everything. Ethan thought he was careful. But I was more careful. I could have gone to Ethan with the cafe receipt and made a scene, but I knew he'd wriggle out of it. He was always a master of excuses. One smile, one "Lizzie, you're overreacting," and I'd melt. Not this time. So I decided to gather more evidence, to act coldly, like a detective in my own life. I installed a tracking app on his phone, a simple tracker that showed his location in real time. If he was lying about late meetings, I'd find out. The next evening, Ethan said he'd be staying late at the office. "New client, Lizzie. Gotta make an impression," he tossed out, zipping up his jacket. I nodded, keeping a smile, as if everything was fine. But as soon as he left, I opened the app. His phone wasn't heading to the office, it was moving toward the city outskirts. An hour later, the dots stopped at the same hotel. I sat on the couch, staring at the screen, feeling my pulse throb in my temples. He was there. Again. I could have driven after him, burst into the room, but what would that achieve? Tears? Shouting? I didn't want to be the woman who begged for explanations. I wanted to be strong. For myself. For the child growing inside me. Instead, I called the hotel. The same front desk number as before. The woman on the other end was polite but cautious. I posed as a conference organizer and asked to confirm if they had a booking under Ethan Wilson's name. She checked. "Yes, a room is booked for tonight." But I can't say more. I thanked her and hung up. My hands shook, but not from fear, from anger. I opened my laptop and started searching for Kate's name. On social media, I found Kate Morgan, a colleague of Ethan's from work. Her profile was public, photos from parties, smiles, stylish dresses. In one picture, she stood next to Ethan at a company event. His hand rested on her shoulder. I remembered that evening, he'd said it was a boring work party. I zoomed in on the photo. His eyes sparkled when he looked at her. Not the way he looked at me. I saved the photo and added it to my evidence folder. The receipt, the hotel booking, the message, now this photo, it was all coming together like a puzzle. But I needed the final piece. Something he couldn't deny. That night, Ethan came home around midnight. I lay in bed, pretending to sleep. He slipped in quietly, thinking I hadn't noticed. But I smelled it, vanilla perfume, the same scent from last week. I clenched my fists under the blanket. Tomorrow, I'd go further. The next day, I drove to his office under the pretense of dropping off documents. I knew Kate was there. I wanted to see her, to look into her eyes. In the lobby, I spotted her by the coffee machine. She was laughing, holding a cup, her hair gleaming under the office lights. I approached, pretending to look for Ethan. "Excuse me," I said, "do you know where Ethan Wilson is?" She turned, and I saw her smile fade. He's probably in his office," she replied, looking away. Her voice trembled. She knew who I was. I thanked her and left, but my heart was racing. She was nervous. She knew. I went home and added this encounter to my notes. Kate wasn't just a colleague. She was the one he spent his evenings with. The one he whispered to on the phone. I opened the tracker app again. Ethan was downtown, though he'd said he was going to a meeting out of town. I realized, he was getting careless. And that was my advantage. I wouldn't stop. I'd gather everything I needed to expose him. Not to win him back, but to free myself. I could have dropped everything, told myself it was enough, and tried to save our marriage for the sake of the child, but every new detail, the perfume, the hotel booking, Kate's nervous glance, made it impossible. My trust in Ethan crumbled like sand. So I decided to go all the way, collecting evidence with cold precision. I wasn't just searching for the truth, I was building armor to protect myself and my future. I started with his financial records. We had a joint account, and I rarely checked it, trusting Ethan with the finances. But now I logged into online banking and reviewed transactions from the past few months. There were expenses I didn't recognize, a $150 dinner at a restaurant when he was supposedly at work, movie tickets for two, even flowers I never received. Each number felt like a slap. I printed the statement and added it to my folder. Then I went back to his phone. The new password had stopped me, but I remembered that he synced his messages with his laptop. I waited until he went for a run and opened his MacBook. In the messenger, I found a chat with Kate. It was short, Ethan deleted messages, but one remained, "You were amazing yesterday. Can't wait for next time." My stomach twisted, but I forced myself to photograph the screen. This was the proof I'd been searching for. I scrolled up, but it was empty. He tried, but he wasn't perfect. I checked his email again, this time in the spam folder. There was an email from a jewelry store, confirmation of a $300 bracelet purchase. I never wore bracelets. But Kate, in her social media photos, had one, thin, with a small pendant. I closed the laptop and sat on the couch, holding the phone with the photo of the message. I could have called him right then, screamed that I knew. But that would be too easy. He'd apologize, lie, promise to fix everything. And I didn't want his fixes. I wanted justice. That evening, Ethan came home with a new story about a tough day. I listened, nodding, but my eyes tracked his every move. How he avoided my gaze, how he nervously adjusted his shirt collar. I noticed a new scratch on his arm, small but noticeable. "What's that?" I asked, pointing to it. He shrugged. Probably bumped into something. But his voice was tense, and I knew, another lie. The next day, I drove to the jewelry store. I showed the purchase confirmation and said I wanted to clarify details about a gift from my husband. The salesman, a young guy with a friendly smile, checked the system. "Sapphire bracelet, right?" Mr. Wilson picked it up himself. "Do you remember if he was with anyone?" I ventured. He thought for a moment. "Yeah, I think so. A woman, blonde." They were laughing, choosing the pendant. I thanked him and left, feeling anger boil in my chest. Kate. It was her. I imagined them standing together, him picking out a gift for her, her smiling, thinking I'd never find out. But I did. At home, I added this information to my folder. It already held receipts, photos, screenshots, addresses. I'd become obsessed, but not insane. Each piece of evidence made me stronger, reminding me I wasn't a victim. I was the one in control. Before bed, I looked at the pregnancy test hidden in the drawer. The 2 lines were still there, like a promise of a new beginning. I placed my hand on my stomach and whispered, "We'll make it." Ethan thought he was ahead. But he was wrong. I knew more than he imagined. And I wasn't done. Ethan started noticing my suspicions, but instead of confessing, he became even more cautious. He no longer left his phone unattended, deleted browser history, even started locking his home office. His behavior screamed guilt, but he kept playing the loving husband. So I decided to take a risk and do something I once thought unthinkable. I called Kate. I waited until Ethan was asleep. His phone was on the nightstand, and I knew he'd changed the password, but I'd noticed him entering it a few days ago, a combination of numbers I memorized. I quietly grabbed the phone, unlocked it, and opened his contacts. Kate was there, under KM, no other details, but it was enough. I stepped into the kitchen so he wouldn't hear and dialed her number. It was late, nearly midnight, but I couldn't wait. After the 3rd ring, she answered. Her voice was sleepy, tinged with worry. "Ethan? What's wrong?" she asked. I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles whitened. "This isn't Ethan," I said softly. "This is Lizzie. His wife." Silence fell. I heard her breathing, quick and uneven. Then she mumbled, "I'm sorry, I don't understand." "Oh, you understand," I cut in, keeping my voice cold. "I know about you. The hotel, the messages, the bracelet. I know everything." She started stammering, but I wasn't listening. "You thought I wouldn't find out?" I continued. Her voice trembled. "He said that you weren't pregnant. That you were getting divorced." My blood pounded in my temples. Divorced? He was lying to her too. I forced myself to breathe. "Listen carefully, Kate. I'm pregnant. And I'm not the one leaving. You are." She started crying, but I hung up. My hands shook, but not from fear, from clarity. Ethan wasn't just cheating. He was building another life, one without me. But he underestimated me. The next day, I went to a lawyer. I wasn't ready for a divorce, not yet, but I wanted to know my rights. The woman at the desk, with a stern look and neat hair, listened to my story. I showed her my folder, receipts, screenshots, photos. She nodded. "You have a strong case, Mrs. Wilson. If this goes to court, these will be key." I went home with new confidence. Ethan was in the living room, scrolling through his phone. I noticed how he quickly closed an app when I walked in. "You're home early," he said, smiling. I nodded, keeping my gaze cold. "Was in town. Met a friend." He didn't ask who. He never did. And that only confirmed, he didn't care. But I did. I sat across from him, watching his every move. He was nervous, his fingers tapping the table. I knew why. Kate had probably called him. And he was scared, I knew. That night, I lay in bed, hand on my stomach. My baby was my anchor. It reminded me why I was fighting. Not for Ethan, not for our marriage, but for us. I imagined him panicking, trying to explain himself to Kate, fearing I'd make a scene. But I wouldn't. I'd be smarter. I'd be stronger. And when the time came, I'd destroy his world just as he'd destroyed mine. I could have forgiven Ethan for the sake of the child, tried to save our family, but his lie after I told him about the pregnancy broke something in me for good. I sat across from him at dinner, holding my fork, and said, "Ethan, I'm pregnant." I expected joy, tears, hugs. Instead, he froze, his face paled, and he muttered, "That's impossible." His panic gave him away. He wasn't happy. He was scared. So I hired a private investigator to gather evidence that would crush him in court. I found the investigator through a friend who divorced a year ago. His name was Mike, a man with gray hair and a calm voice who didn't ask unnecessary questions. I met him at a cafe far from our neighborhood. I handed him my folder, receipts, screenshots, hotel addresses, even Kate's name. "I need facts," I said. "Photos, videos, anything that proves the affair." He nodded. "I'll do it quietly. Give me a week." The week dragged on like an eternity. I lived a double life. At home, I was the loving wife, making breakfast, smiling at Ethan as if nothing had changed. But in my head, I replayed his every move, every word. He was getting more nervous. One evening, he snapped, "Have you been talking to anyone about us?" I shrugged. Who would I talk to? He didn't answer, but his eyes darted. He was scared. And that was good. Mike called after 6 days. "I've got something," he said. "Meet me tomorrow." We met at the same cafe. He placed a folder in front of me. Inside were photos, Ethan and Kate, walking to the hotel hand in hand. Another, them kissing in a car. And a video, a short clip of them entering a room, laughing. I looked at it, and my hands didn't shake. I felt only cold clarity. "Is that all?" I asked. "One more thing," Mike said. I checked her out. "Kate Morgan, 29, works with your husband, 2 years. They got closer about 6 months ago. There are witnesses who saw them together at restaurants, bars. And, she posted a photo on social media. The bracelet. The one he bought." I nodded. "Thank you, Mike. This is what I needed." At home, I added everything to my folder. It grew thicker, heavier, like my resolve. I imagined showing this evidence to the lawyer, Ethan standing in court with nothing to say. He thought I was weak, that I'd forgive, that I'd stay a victim. But he was wrong. That evening, Ethan came home late. I noticed how he checked his phone, hid it when I walked in. I didn't say a word. I just looked at him, and he looked away. He knew I suspected something. And it scared him. Before bed, I opened the folder and reviewed the photos again. Ethan and Kate, happy, carefree, as if I didn't exist. But I did. And my child did. I placed my hand on my stomach and felt a slight movement, the first kick. It was like a signal, I was on the right path. I wouldn't stop. Ethan would pay for everything he'd done. Not with tears, not with screams, but with cold, relentless justice. The investigator confirmed that Kate wasn't a one-time mistake but a months-long affair, but I no longer felt pain, only a cold clarity that filled me with strength. My tears had dried, my heart had hardened. So I made a plan, not emotional, not chaotic, but precise, like a chess game where I made the final move. I went back to the lawyer, this time with a new folder. Photos, videos, witness statements, everything Mike had gathered lay before her. She reviewed the evidence, her eyebrows raised. "Mrs. Wilson," she said, "this is more than enough. If you file for divorce, he won't stand a chance. The court will consider the affair, and we can demand compensation, alimony, even part of his assets." I nodded. "I want him to pay. Not just with money. I want him to understand what he's lost." She noted my wishes. "We can start the process whenever you're ready. But keep in mind, this will be emotionally tough." "I'm ready," I replied. And I meant it. The next step was to prepare Ethan for the blow. I didn't want a scene, didn't want to scream or cry. I wanted him to reach the edge himself, feeling the walls closing in. I started acting differently, colder, but not distant. I asked questions that made him nervous. "Were you at that cafe near the office yesterday? I heard it's good." Or, "Did you pick up your stuff from the dry cleaner? I saw your jacket in the car." He answered, but his voice shook. He knew I suspected something but couldn't grasp how much I knew. I saw him check his phone more often, hide in his office, avoid my eyes. He was like an animal in a cage, and I held the key. I also took care of myself. I made a doctor's appointment to check on the pregnancy. Everything was fine, my baby was growing, healthy and strong. The doctor smiled, "You'll be a great mom." I felt warmth in my chest. Yes, I would. And I'd do everything to give my child the best life, free of lies, free of betrayal. That evening, I decided to make one final move before the strike. I invited Ethan to dinner, not at home, but at the restaurant where we'd celebrated our anniversary 2 years ago. He was surprised but agreed. We sat at the table, candles burning, the waiter pouring wine. I didn't drink, because of the pregnancy, but he didn't notice. "Are you happy, Ethan?" I asked, looking into his eyes. He faltered. "Of course, Lizzie." "Why do you ask?" I smiled. "Just thinking about our future. About the baby." He choked on his wine. "Yeah, that's great." But his hands trembled. I didn't press. I just looked at him, letting him feel my strength. He didn't know I'd already won. That I held his life in my hands. That tomorrow, I'd file the papers. When we got home, I lay in bed and closed my eyes. I imagined his face when he got the summons. I imagined him calling me, begging to talk. But I wouldn't talk. I'd say everything in court, where my evidence would speak for me. I was no longer the Lizzie who cried over single-line tests or waited for Ethan to come home from work. That pain was gone, like old skin, and in its place was a new me, strong, confident, relentless. I'd gathered every piece of evidence, every receipt, every call, every photo. My folder wasn't just a stack of papers, it was my weapon. The lawyer, reviewing everything again, said, "Lizzie, this is airtight. He doesn't stand a chance." And I knew, I wasn't just a victim. I was the one controlling the game. I started preparing for a new life. I opened a separate bank account, transferring some of our savings, legally, through the lawyer, so Ethan couldn't accuse me of theft. I found an apartment, small but cozy, with big windows and a nursery I already pictured in pastel tones. I signed up for prenatal classes, learning to breathe, plan, and prepare for childbirth. Each step made me stronger, reminding me I wasn't just surviving, I was building a future. Ethan sensed the changes, though he didn't fully understand them. He grew quieter, more cautious, as if afraid to say the wrong thing. One evening, he tried talking about the baby. "Lizzie," he began, "I'm happy, really. We'll be great parents." I looked at him, my gaze cold. "Are you sure?" I asked. He faltered, mumbled something about work, and retreated to his office. I knew why he was running. He feared the truth. He feared me. I also secured support. I told my sister, Emily, everything. She came over the next day, hugged me, and said, "You're stronger than I thought." We sat in the kitchen, drinking tea, and I showed her the folder of evidence. She gasped. "Lizzie, you're like a spy." I laughed, for the first time in a long time. "I'm just doing what I have to." Emily promised to be there when the baby was born. She even offered to move closer to help. I felt warmth spread through my chest. I wasn't alone. I had family, I had myself, I had my child. Ethan was no longer the center of my world. I also worked on myself. I returned to yoga, which I'd abandoned due to stress. Every movement, every breath reminded me I was alive, I was strong. I read books on parenting, on being a confident mom. I even went to the hairdresser and got a new haircut, a shorter bob that made me look younger, bolder. Ethan noticed. "You look different," he said one morning. "Yeah," I replied. "I'm changing." He didn't know how much. The lawyer filed the court papers. She said Ethan would be notified within a week. I imagined his face when he opened the envelope. I imagined him calling me, begging to talk. But I wouldn't. I'd say everything in court, where my evidence would speak for me. That evening, I stood in front of the mirror, looking at myself. My belly was noticeable now, and I placed my hands on it. "We're ready," I whispered. I was no longer afraid. I didn't doubt. I knew I was doing the right thing. Ethan thought he controlled our life, but he was wrong. I took control. And I wouldn't give it to anyone. Ethan came home at 6, as usual, thinking I was cooking dinner or watching TV. He tossed his jacket, threw his keys on the table, and called, "Lizzie, I'm home." I stood in the kitchen, holding the folder of evidence. The moment had come. I placed the folder on the table, next to the lawyer's letter, and said, "We need to talk." He walked in, his smile fading when he saw my expression. "What's this?" he asked, pointing to the folder. I opened it, showing the first photo, him and Kate, holding hands outside the hotel. His eyes widened. I placed the next one, them kissing in the car. Then a screenshot of his message, "You were amazing yesterday. You thought I wouldn't find out?" I said, keeping my voice steady. "I know everything. About Kate, the hotels, the bracelet. About your lies." He tried to speak, but I raised my hand. "Don't lie anymore. I'm tired of it." I placed the lawyer's letter in front of him. "These are divorce papers. I filed today. And one more thing, I'm pregnant, Ethan. But you won't come near my child unless I allow it." His face went white as a sheet. "Lizzie, wait, I can explain." "There's nothing to explain," I cut him off. "Pack your things. You have a week." He stood, as if paralyzed, his hands trembling. I saw panic in his eyes, but I didn't care. I no longer felt pain. I felt strength. "You can't do this," he muttered. "We're a family." I laughed, coldly, sharply. "Family? You destroyed our family, Ethan. I'm building a new one, without you." He tried to step closer, but I stepped back. "Don't touch me. Go." He stood for another minute, then turned and went to the bedroom. I heard him open the closet, hangers clattering. I sat at the table, hand on my stomach. My baby moved, and I smiled. We were free. The next day, I met with the lawyer. She said Ethan had already contacted his attorney, but his position was weak. "He might try to negotiate," she said. "But with your evidence, he won't win." I nodded. "I don't want to negotiate. I want him to pay." She smiled. "Then we go all the way." I went home and started packing his things. His shirts, his watch, his stupid sneakers, all into boxes. I felt no regret. I felt relief. Each box brought me closer to a new life. A week later, Ethan moved out. He left the keys on the table and a note, "Lizzie, I'm sorry." I crumpled it and threw it away. His words meant nothing. I stood in the living room, looking at the empty space where our wedding photos once hung. I'd taken them down yesterday. In their place, I hung a painting, bright, with flowers blooming under the sun. It was like me, I was blooming, despite everything. I placed my hand on my stomach and felt another kick. "We did it," I whispered. I didn't look back. I moved forward, for myself, for my child, for our new life. Ethan was the past. And I was the future.